Why did this quaint hotel in the midst of a beautiful wilderness justify the setting of horror?
Please. No.
When veteran auteur and master director Stanley Kubrick brought Stephen King's 1977 novel The Shining to life, he did so in near-complete secrecy. The film was billed as the ultimate horror, a phrase that would accompany the first week of promotions attempting to draw audiences to its summer 1980 release. But ultimately it drew mixed reviews, with some not finding the scary movie or faithful novel adaptation they expected. What makes The Shining the ultimate horror film that has, in the years since, generated an almost unparalleled cult following? After all, it has no butcher knife-wielding escaped mental patients or drowned hockey players slashing up the playground. No blood is even physically spilled in the film until the end, and the majority of the horror takes place with all the lights shining right on it. Perhaps it's because viewers got Kubrick's definition of horror wrong. Perhaps it's because his film confronts us with something much more horrifying. Perhaps it's the ultimate horror because it holds up a mirror to a society that desperately wants to look anywhere else but at its own reflection.
Yes.
Look anywhere than in the twisting paths through the endless shadowy backrooms of its own subconscious depths. Because as it turns out, people don't really like to look into mirrors when it wasn't their idea. In The Shining, we watch an average American family unknowingly running on the resultant programming of so many buried childhood, ancestral, and societal traumas that they're complete strangers to themselves, as they get isolated together for a few months and completely self-destruct in what otherwise should be a peaceful space of scenic beauty that more than meets all the basic physiological necessities that form the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. Complete with so much food they could eat for a year and never have the same meal twice.
One thing for sure, you don't have to worry about food, because you folks can eat up here a whole year and never have the same thing twice.
So at first watch, people didn't really like this movie. And that's because Kubrick wasn't just making a fiction adaptation to nibble popcorn to in between cheesy jump scares. Instead, he went out of his way to use Stephen King's novel as a container and the screen as a vehicle to drive audiences to that place where the lines between fantasy and reality are blurred to unrecognizability. Once there, he tapped into the dark and rarely explored depths of the collective American psyche, forcing us all to confront the shadows lurking down there, taking the audience along for the augmented reality horror ride, whether they liked it or not. A lot of conspiratorial theories have been tossed out there about what this movie is attempting to express, and we've pretty much heard them all. Here's part one of another. In the very first moment of Kubrick's opening credits, we're confronted with a mirror. The whole film is made out of them.
I'm quite sure there's nothing.
So many, in fact, that you could play this movie forwards, overlapping with the movie backwards, and scenes seem to call and answer each other front to back.
Absolutely fine now.
It is well known that Stanley Kubrick is not a director who left anything to chance. The bird's eye view of the camera follows a yellow Volkswagen Beetle to the Continental Divide. This fades into the road to Timberline Lodge, the exterior used for the Overlook Hotel in the film.
They're brought on by
Interestingly, like the rest of the Hall of Mirrors that make up this movie, when we later see Jack taking his family to the hotel to start his job as caretaker there, their car is driving on the other side of the canyon, in what would technically be the opposite direction.
We can always think about having some.
As author and artist Julie Kearns points out, the opening shots along with the closing day shots pinpoint a kind of psychological, philosophical, mystical place for the lodge as being on the Continental Divide. In the opening, the VW travels east to west on the Going to the Sun Road, and the final crossfade is just to the west of the Continental Divide. In the closing day section, the VW travels west to east on the road, and the final crossfade to the lodge occurs west of the Continental Divide. There's really only one road to the Overlook, so it would be impossible to approach the lodge from the opposite westerly direction. From the very first shots of the film, in other words, we, the audience, become Alice through the looking glass. We follow Jack's VW Beetle as it twists and turns through mountains along a road located in Glacier National Park, literally called Going to the Sun Road. The same one we also once drove, not even realizing we'd seen it maybe
What
a dozen
sort of
times
injury
on
did he
screen in a
have?
movie first.
He dislocated his shoulder.
This is not Road to Bob's
How did he
House
manage
or
to
Highway
do that?
16 or Mountain Park Road, but Going to the Sun Road.
It was just one
The
of
road
those
itself
things,
is held up by a retaining
purely an
wall
accident.
they named Golden Stairs.
My husband had
I mean, the whole thing sounds like an
been
Alchemist
drinking,
inside
and
joke.
he came home about 3 hours late.
Going to the Sun Road is an engineering
So he
marvel, physically
wasn't
designed to blend
exactly in
into
the
the
greatest mood
mountainside,
that night.
and it closes in late October and
Yeah.
remains closed through spring due to
Danny
snow.
had scattered some of his school papers
Going
all
to
over
the
the
Sun
room,
has been
and my
described as,
husband
quote, one of
grabbed
the
his
most
arm and
difficult
pulled him
roads in
away
North
from him.
America to snowplow in the spring.
It's just the sort of thing you
And
do 100
reopening it
times with
each
a
year is a
child.
process the Park
Park
Service
and
sums up
treats.
as a monumental challenge.
On this particular
It's so
occasion,
beleaguered by snow that Going to the Sun Road isn't
used too
fully
much
open
strength
most
and
years
he
until
injured
July,
Danny's arm.
the time astronomers refer to the Earth being at its aphelion,
Anyway,
or most distant
something
point
good did
in its
come out of
orbit
it all because he
from the
said,
Sun. So this is a
"Wendy,
road,
I'm never
then,
going to touch another
that could
drop.
only take you to the
And if I
Sun
do,
in the
you
dead
can
of
leave
winter, when it
And
is
he didn't,
impassable and closed to the
and
public.
He hasn't had any
A
alcohol.
road open just
and,
long enough for hordes of
darkness.
tourists to unconsciously ponder its mystery, just long enough to turn around in October and begin the closing process for winter all over again. Sisyphus struggling in vain to outmaneuver nature, year after year.